Habits That Haunt Me by Patricia Sorg. How does one fight off alcoholism when the demons are standing on your doorstep? Habits are what haunt Priscilla in the psychological and spiritual thriller where she must fight two types of spirits, the one that reside inside her head and the more friendlier ones that creep between her walls. After stumbling into a hidden political plot to cover up a family's murderous and terror-ridden past, Brissa fights to restore the greatness that once walked the halls of a Catholic girls' boarding school. The treasures and secrets she uncovers just might place her forever into a hidden catacomb alive. This book is a lot of fun, believe it or not. It goes into a young woman who is exploring life after losing a baby and losing a husband, and she gets thrown right into the brinks of hell and has to pick herself up. So it's a highly recommended book. Patricia, born in Guatemala City, she's an international artist who tells her stories through her paintings and her writings. She's received awards both in Latin America as well as the United States. Her first novel, Mountains That Touch the Sky, was published in Spanish and in English. And her second novel, that's the one we're doing, Habits That Haunt Me, we're doing the English version. The Spanish version has already been published and is out there. So Patricia now lives in Florida, Sarasota, Florida. So if you're in the Sarasota, Florida area, go ahead on down to the Art Center and see if you can check her out and say hi, and maybe she'll autograph a book for you. So anyway, sit back and enjoy what I'm about to read to you, the first two chapters of Habits That Haunt Me. Prologue. It was the first time since the three had died that they were once again together inside the old mansion. What unforgettable memories their spirits held, lovely memories of intense and long-lived lives mixed within sudden and unexpected deaths. The small table was perfectly set for tea. Porcelain cups decorated with the aroma of freshly cut roses created an environment of love and companionship. Juan Ignacio had brought the flowers just for Sarah, and he now worked to arrange the stems with difficulty as the vase was small and his hands trembled from age. "If we were to count," Juan Ignacio asked, chuckling, "how many years would it add up to now?" "If we add all our times here together," Sarah replied with a grin, "hundreds." "Wonka, why?" The tender gaze of his blue eyes gave her reason to pause as she remembered his subtle gentleness. Wonka's eyes still held the loving splendor that Sarah had loved so much. She frowned as she studied his once tall statue that now resembled more of a slouch. Wonka struggled to stand, and Sarah reached out and grabbed his arm. "These legs," the old man sighed, "always gives me problems." "Sit down," Sarah said softly. He sat with difficulty, and Sarah watched as he worked with his bony and aging fingers that to this day demonstrated he never worked hard a day in his life. She hugged Wancho and kissed the top of his head, a man that was once young and full of energy, a man that was, at one time, her greatest love. "You're beautiful, Sarah, as always," he whispered. Was that a tremor? Rogelio, the old farmhand, darted into the room and stared up at the swinging iron chandelier. "Perhaps a slight one," Sarah replied, nodding. "Nothing to worry about. Remember that everything belongs to the other world now, just like us. We're from that other world." Sarah walked over to the tall windows and placed her hands on her hips. She frowned and she shook her head. "We should open these curtains so we can admire the outside." Sarah yanked back the drapes and stared out at the dimming horizon. Rogelio stood near the fireplace and rubbed his hands together. He still held that peasant appearance that was a leftover from his childhood. Short of stature and donning a shabby straw hat, Rogelio's happy smile framed his crisp yellow teeth. Tanned and cracked skin from years of working under the hot sun now added to the deep furrow that crisscrossed his forehead, and he walked with a slow and stooped gait. "There," Sarah said, enjoying the view. "Now we can see the boarding school and the belfry." "The sunset is beautiful," Wanko said. "Look at those silhouettes of the volcanoes against that magentic and orange sky." He took in a deep breath as he held onto the windowsill for support. "Tea?" Sarah offered while still taking a peek. "That's why we're here," Rogelio replied. Sarah's hands shook as she held the teapot. The porcelain clinked when the hot brew flowed into the delicate cups. "Remember how we jumped like goats when we were kids?" she giggled. "We were always so happy, so innocent, and so amazed at life." "Happy times," Wanko smiled and nodded. "Are we telling the story now?" Rogelio kept rubbing his hands together. "Yes or no?" "Of course," Sarah replied. "It's still fresh in our minds. Shall we recite it together?" "And where do we begin?" Rogelio asked. "At the convent? The city? The boarding school?" "We'll just tell it as she would have told it," Sarah whispered before taking a sip of her tea. Chapter 1. The decision between having another drink or dropping an Alka-Seltzer into a glass of water was an easy one. Not much was left in the bottle, and a migraine was looming just beyond Brissa's reach. The door swung open, and she sat her glass onto the table. However, her reach fell short. "Sorry," Sonia chuckled as she frowned at the now shattered glass. The door was open. "I'll get a broom." Brissa's head pounded. "I only had a few drinks this morning." Her eyes focused on the withered roses Sonia was carrying. "Did I miss something?" "The funeral?" Sonia nodded. "Manager of Pros S.A. where we work, remember?" "I'm dressed in black." Brissa waved at her skirt. "You're always dressed in black." "Shit," Brissa whispered. "I'm an idiot. Did the deceased ever explain that I was a pushover, easy to manipulate, and other stuff that doesn't describe me in the best of light?" "What's going on with you?" Sonia opened the fridge. "Have you eaten today, other than vodka, wine, beer? Is this your life now?" Brissa dropped an Alka-Seltzer tablet into a glass of water and watched as the bubbles fizzed. Sonia looked at the woman and frowned. "You didn't go to the funeral, you didn't go to the burial, and he was the only person who actually trusted you. Do you do this shit on purpose, or are you deliberately trying to destroy what's left of your small world?" "He's dead. Who cares? Everyone dies eventually." Brissa chuckled and snapped her fingers. "We'll all disappear like a puff of smoke one day." "Lately you're like another person." Sonia leaned against the kitchen table and picked up a damp towel. She played with it before tossing it onto the counter. "Brissa, I'm thankful for how you've helped me. When I really needed you, you were there, but lately you've been acting off." Brissa shrugged. Her friend was probably right, and she couldn't explain what was running through her mind. It was as if her recent separation from her husband, Morenio, had deposited her near a dead end, a place where her thoughts sought for vengeance, and something else loomed. Something that eluded her. "Did anyone miss me?" "Angela was asking about you. I called several times. You never called me back." They both looked at the withered roses that Sonia had brought. "These are the flowers you asked me to buy. I thought they were for the funeral." Sonia sighed. "What did Angela want?" Brissa shrugged. "Say goodbye to me? Fire me?" "Things don't look good." Sonia shook her head. "She did say she needed to see you in private." "When?" "Tomorrow." Sonia shrugged. "At 9. Brissa sat and scratched her head. "Damn. You need a bath." Sonia took in a deep breath. "And sleep." She walked across the room and slapped her hands on her hips. "Dyed your hair? Looks darker, but I can still see your roots." "So I colored it," Brissa snapped. "Blondes are not respected in the workplace. Brunettes are given more authority." "Hair coloring has nothing to do with it. Your priorities are all upside down," Sonia growled. "I've always envied you, Brissa. You're pretty. You have, I don't know, how many postgraduate degrees?" Everything comes so easy for you. Easy? What do you know about easy? Brissa walked into the bathroom. Sonia followed and stopped at the baby crib. She ran her fingers along the top and frowned. I'm sorry about the... Brissa grabbed a half-empty bottle of vodka and hurried back to the kitchen table. She filled a glass that was sitting next to the still fizzling water. You've always been a busybody, Sonia, always fussing about me and Mourinho, whether he liked this one or that one, and what does so-and-so think. Brissa gulped the liquid, and a tear rolled down her cheek. Annulment! He annulled our marriage, remember? Because of the... Stop it! Brissa slammed the glass onto the table. She pointed to the door and yelled out as another tear fell. Get out! Get out of my life! Don't come back, and don't come anywhere near me! Sonia grabbed the wilted roses and aimed for the hallway. Nobody's going to come anywhere near you, Brissa. Nobody. And that's the problem. You push everyone away. You only see a glass half empty of alcohol. She pointed to the empty glass on the table. You see everything wrong. You're an architect, and the opportunities are out there. You just can't see through those damn bloodshot eyes of yours. She flipped Brissa the finger and threw the flowers into the trash can. As she walked down the hallway, Sonia yelled, At 9 in the morning with Angela. Brissa's head was still pounding. Desperation ran through her veins, hotter than the alcohol she was drinking. Since her separation from Mourinho, Brissa believed that her personal life was over, and it seemed that her professional career was almost finished. She had left her work behind to become a housewife and mother. Mourinho, her ex-husband of only a few months, was now the one working her projects. The future resembled more of an empty bottle of vodka than a bright sunrise. Brissa picked up the disheveled roses. The aromas surrounded her, and she smiled. After filling a vase with water, she carefully arranged the dented stems so they looked a little better. Running her fingers across the wilting petals, their fragility frightened her, for they somehow resembled what surrounded her right now. After walking into the bathroom, Brissa glanced into the mirror. I need to dye my roots. She pulled out a box of coloring from off the shelf and sat on the toilet seat. The dark dye soon burned deeply into her scalp. With each sip of the bubbling brew, and with each passing second, her migraine pounded harder, stronger. She showered and wrapped a towel around her head. 2 more Alka-Seltzers were dropped into a fresh glass of water. The red roses now looked beautiful, as if suddenly renewed by an invisible force. What in the world? She blinked several times. Can I trust my eyes? She leaned over, and her head pounded harder. The fragrance sent a mixed sensation of freedom combined with imprisonment all through her. Can't I trust anybody? Brissa nervously climbed the steps to the entrance of Prose S.A. With each step her heart pounded and her hands shook, for today could be the last time she ever walked through those doors. On the second floor she aimed for the coffee maker. As she passed a large mirror she stopped and stared at her reflection. A woman with darkened eyes and wearing a frail and sickly complexion stared back. Sonia walked behind her, and her friend's reflection flashed a slight moment of concern before fading into a look of total disgust. Sonia did not stop to chat. Although a pretty girl, Sonia was a little overweight. Normally she wore a beautiful smile, but not today. Brissa stepped into her office and thought about her small stash of personal items, 2 photos, 3 diplomas, and a nameplate. Brissa Muriel, architect, civil engineer. Brissa placed her little trinkets inside a small cardboard box and shrugged. She would carry them out to her car after the meeting, after she was fired. A set of plans for a project called Antonio Heights reflected back the morning light. She had spent many long hours working on the architectural designs and structural calculations. Disappointment rained down around her, and she wiped away a tear. Brissa picked up a frame that held one of her diplomas, and a tear fell. I will no longer build things, she whispered before pushing the thought from her mind. Don't want to live in Antonio anyway. Mourinho, her ex, stopped at her door and tapped on the wall. When she turned around, he acted as if he hadn't seen her. Brissa stepped into the hallway, and the man glanced over at her. Flipping him off, she smiled. He was not the person she wanted to run into this morning. Hesitating for only a moment at the entrance to Angela's office, she shot a breath spray onto her tongue before entering. "Come in, Brissa!" Angela's overly cheery words echoed through the room. Fearing what the woman was about to say, Brissa spoke first. I'm sorry about Engineer Lopez. He was a wonderful person." Angela nodded. "Sit down, Brissa. I need to discuss something important." "Listen, Angela, I understand. I want you to know that I'm grateful for... You worked on these plans, yes?" Angela ignored Brissa's words and pointed to several sets of plans from the Antonio Heights project that were lying on her desk. "The architectural and structural ones, yes?" Brissa nodded as her hands shook. "We're giving you the project." Angela smiled and sat on the corner of her desk. "The one at the Gerardo Ranch. You'll manage it all." "Excuse me?" Brissa's voice trembled. You're serious?" The secretary walked in and placed several documents on Angela's desk. Angela nodded at the young woman before glancing back at Brissa and adding, "Lopez wanted you to work the project." She nodded again. "No one else?" But he isn't here anymore. He died, remember? Mourinho's begging for the work. However, the board also agrees that it should be yours. I don't... Look, your ex is working hard to land this project and take it away from you. I know you've been busy on the divorce. A moment. Brissa said the words so fast that she surprised even herself. A moment. You're perfect for this project. Antonio Heights was your design, your idea. We need you out there. It'll be a lot of work, demand your full attention. Are you up to it? To be honest, you've been sitting on the sidelines lately, which is understandable. Angela stood and walked over to the windows. You were focused on making a home and raising a kid. That's over now. Brissa glanced at her hands and frowned. She placed them under her legs, praying that Angela wouldn't see them shaking. I thought you were going to... Going to what, fire you? Angela chuckled and sat in her chair. Thought about it, but I feel it important to give you another opportunity to prove yourself. You need this project, Brissa. It's now or never, and we can't wait. Why the rush? UNESCO is about to declare Antonio as a World Heritage Site. Something about its historic colonial worth. This project must be completed before they can finalize their plans. You'll live in Antonio during the construction, not here in the city. May I think it over? The thought of living in such a small town did not excite Brissa. You have objections? Angela stared at her. You never cease to surprise me. Brissa frowned. I was born in Antonio. After drawing up these plans, I promised myself I'd never return.